I gave my wife an expensive car after the affair, and it was the best decision of my life. My name's Daniel. I'm 42 now, though I suppose that doesn't matter much. What matters is the life I'd built, stable, predictable, the kind of life you'd sketch on a napkin if someone asked what settled looks like. A house just outside the city, low and modern with 2 big windows. A career in finance that paid for those windows, and a wife, Clara, who filled the rooms with her quiet energy. 15 years together, a rhythm so familiar I could hum it in my sleep. She was beautiful in that understated way, her dark hair always swept back, her voice soft but firm, like she knew exactly where she stood. I thought I knew where we stood too. Turns out, I was wrong. It started small, the way these things always do. A flicker of something off-key in the melody of our days. I'd come home from the office, tie loosened, mind half-fried from numbers, and she'd be there, distracted. Not the usual kind. Not the "I'm tired" or "work was long" drift. No, this was sharper, a pull I couldn't place. She'd smile, kiss my cheek, ask about my day, but her eyes, they'd flicker, just for a second, like she was somewhere else. I told myself it was nothing. People drift. Marriages ebb. 15 years is a long time to keep every moment electric. Isn't that what the self-help books say? But then came the scent. It was late September, the air crisp enough to carry smells further than you'd expect. I'd walked into the kitchen one evening, tossing my keys on the counter, when it hit me, a faint trace of something unfamiliar. Cologne, heavy and spiced, not mine. I wear cedar and citrus, understated, clean. This was different, bold, like it wanted to be noticed. It lingered on her jacket, the one she'd slung over the chair after coming back from her gymnastics class. She'd taken it up a year ago, said it was for her back, for flexibility, a way to feel alive again. I'd nodded, supportive, even paid for the private sessions. Why wouldn't I? Clara deserved to feel alive. I just didn't know how alive she'd gotten. I stood there, staring at that jacket, the cologne curling into my lungs like an uninvited guest. My mind spun, rational at first. Maybe it was someone else's, brushed against her in a crowded room. Maybe the gym smelled of it, a haze of sweat and swagger. But then I reached for the pocket, almost without thinking, and my fingers brushed something soft, folded. A handkerchief, crisp white with a faint gray stripe, the kind a man tucks into a suit jacket for show. Not hers. Not mine. And there, stitched in the corner, a tiny initial, R. My chest tightened, a slow squeeze, but my face stayed calm. It always does. People say I'm steady, unshakable, even. They don't see the storm inside, the way it churns, dark and restless, waiting for a crack to spill through. That night, I didn't ask her about it. Didn't confront her, didn't shout. I poured a glass of bourbon, sat in the living room with the lights low, and let the question simmer. Who was R? Why was his scent on her clothes, his handkerchief in her pocket? Was it a mistake, a fluke, or something heavier, something deliberate? Clara came home an hour later, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her voice bright as she called out a hello. I watched her move through the house, graceful, effortless, the woman I'd loved since we were 27, and wondered how much of her I'd stopped seeing. She didn't notice the way I studied her, didn't feel the weight of my silence. Or maybe she did, and she was better at pretending than I'd ever given her credit for. The next day, I started watching. Not following, not yet. Just observing. The way she lingered over her phone, typing quick replies then setting it face down. The way she'd leave for her gymnastics class an hour early, saying traffic was bad or she wanted to stretch. Small things, threads I hadn't tugged before. Each one tightened the knot in my gut, but I kept my hands steady, my voice even. I didn't want to be the fool who jumps to conclusions. I wanted proof not for her, but for me. Because once you know something, really know it, there's no going back. And I wasn't ready to lose the life I'd built. Not without a fight. So I waited. I watched. And then, one Thursday evening, she left her jacket on the counter again. The cologne was back, stronger this time, and the handkerchief was gone. Replaced, maybe, or tucked somewhere else. I didn't search. Didn't need to. The scent was enough, a taunt, a dare. That's when the idea came to me, not loud or frantic, but quiet, clear, like a whisper in the dark. A car. A gift. A way to see where she'd go when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd give her the Mercedes, wrap it in a bow of trust, and let her drive straight into the truth. It was reckless, maybe. Brilliant, definitely. And it would change everything. The Mercedes arrived on a Saturday, delivered to our driveway with a shine that caught the morning sun. Clara's eyes widened when she saw it, surprise, yes, but something else too, a flicker of delight she couldn't quite hide. I handed her the keys, my voice steady, casual, as if it were nothing more than a thoughtful gesture. "You've been running around so much lately," I said, watching her fingers curl around the fob. "Thought this might make things easier." She smiled, kissed my cheek, said something about how generous I was. Generous. The word sat heavy in my throat, but I swallowed it down, kept my face smooth. She didn't know about the tracker, small, discreet, tucked into the wheel well by a guy I'd found online. Cash transaction, no questions. I wasn't proud of it, not then. But I wasn't ashamed either. The first few days, I let it breathe. Didn't check the app, didn't hover. Told myself I was giving her a chance to prove me wrong, though deep down I knew that was a lie. The cologne, the handkerchief, the way her phone glowed with messages she never read aloud, those weren't accidents. They were breadcrumbs, and I'd been too stubborn to follow them until now. By Tuesday, the pull was too strong. I sat in my office, door closed, and opened the app. A map blinked to life, a red dot pulsing over our house. She was home. Relief washed through me, brief and fragile, but then I scrolled back, Monday's history. The dot didn't stay put. It traced a line from our street to a strip of shops downtown, lingered there for 2 hours, then looped back. Her gymnastics class was the other way, across town. I stared at the screen, my pulse steady but loud in my ears, and felt the storm inside me shift, less chaos now, more focus. Wednesday night, she left again. "Class," she called over her shoulder, keys jangling as she slipped out the door. I waited 10 minutes, then checked. The dot moved fast, confident, toward that same downtown spot. Not a gym, not a studio. A residential block, low-rise apartments with brick facades and narrow parking lots. I sat there, bourbon in hand, watching the dot settle. An hour passed. 2. My mind churned, but my hands stayed still. I didn't call her, didn't text. I wanted more than a hunch. I wanted evidence, the kind that holds up when everything else falls apart. So I waited, let the tracker do its work, let her think she was free. Thursday, I dug deeper. Pulled up the address on a property site, public records, easy enough to find if you know where to look. Unit 3B, leads to a name I didn't expect but recognized the second I saw it. Richard Malone. Her gymnastics coach. A man I'd met once, maybe twice, tall, lean, with a handshake too firm and a grin too wide. He'd been at our house last spring, a casual drop-in after a session, sipping coffee at our table like he belonged there. I hadn't thought much of it then, just a guy who liked his job, liked her flexibility. Now, the memory twisted, sharp and sour. The handkerchief flashed in my mind, are stitched in the corner, crisp and deliberate. The cologne made sense too, that bold spice scent clinging to her jacket. It was his. It had always been his. Friday, I set the trap. She left for class again, her routine so polished I almost admired it. I watched the dot glide downtown, park at Richard's building. This time, I didn't sit still. I drove, not close, not reckless, just near enough to see the Mercedes in his lot. I didn't get out, didn't confront. Instead, I snapped photos, time-stamped, clear, her car, the building, the night wrapping around it all. She stayed 3 hours. When she came home, her hair was loose, her cheeks flushed, and she smelled faintly of him again. I nodded as she talked about her workout, her voice light, practiced. "Tough session," she said. I smiled, said I was glad she was keeping at it. The storm inside me roared, but my face stayed calm, always calm. Saturday, I checked the tracker history again. Patterns emerged Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday nights, Friday evenings. Not random, not spontaneous. A schedule, carved out in the cracks of her life. I cross-checked dates, times, matched them to her excuses, gymnastics, errands, a friend's house. Lies, all of them, stacking up like cards she didn't know I'd seen. Sunday, I hired a lawyer quietly, through a contact who didn't ask why. Told him I needed options, proof, leverage. He said infidelity mattered in court if I could back it up. I could. Photos, tracker logs, timestamps, cold, hard, undeniable. Monday night, she went again. I followed this time, not in my car, but on foot after parking blocks away. Watched her slip into his building. I stood in the shadows, phone ready, and recorded her entering, the door closing, the lights flicking on in 3B. 2 hours later, she came out, adjusting her scarf, glancing around like she felt the air shift. She didn't see me. I had what I needed. Video, dates, a story no judge could ignore. The storm inside me settled then, not gone, just quieter, coiled tight and ready. Clara thought she'd played me, thought I was blind. but I'd seen enough. And now, I'd make sure she saw me too. The air in the house felt thick that Tuesday night, heavy with something unspoken, something I'd carried for days, waiting for the right moment to let loose. Clara came home late, the car purring into the driveway just past 10. I heard the door click shut, her footsteps soft on the hardwood, and I sat there in the living room, lights low, the tracker app glowing on my phone. She didn't call out like usual. Maybe she sensed it, the shift, the way silence can turn sharp. I didn't move, didn't look up, just let her find me there, a glass of bourbon in one hand, the photos stacked neatly on the coffee table in front of me. Evidence, cold and patient, waiting for her eyes. She stepped in, jacket still on, and froze. Her gaze flicked to the table. Pictures of her car parked at Richard's, timestamps glowing in the corners. The video still paused on my screen with her silhouette at his door. Her face didn't crumble, not right away. It tightened, lips pressing thin, eyes narrowing like she was calculating how much I knew, how much she could dodge. "What's this?" she said, voice clipped, testing the water. I set the glass down, slow, deliberate, and met her stare. "You tell me." My tone was even, too even, maybe, and it threw her. She shifted, arms crossing, a wall going up fast. "I don't know what you're playing at, Daniel." Her words came quick, sharp, like she could slice through the moment before it grew teeth. I stood then, slow, letting the height of me fill the room, and slid the handkerchief from my pocket. White, striped, or stitched in the corner. I held it up, let it dangle between us. "Found this a while back. Smells like him. You've been carrying it around, Clara. Or did he?" Her breath hitched, just for a second, and the storm inside me surged, hot and wild, but I kept it locked behind my ribs. She didn't answer, just stared at the cloth like it might speak for her. I took a step closer, voice low, steady. "I gave you that car, watched you drive it to him. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, like clockwork. I've got it all, every move, every lie. Richard Malone, your coach. How long, Clara?" Her eyes flared then, anger snapping through the calm she'd tried to hold. "You tracked me," she spat, stepping back, hands dropping to her sides. "That's sick, you're sick." I laughed, short and bitter, the sound bouncing off the walls. "Sick? You're asleep with another man in my life, my house, my time, and I'm the one who's sick." She flinched, but only barely, then straightened, chin lifting like she'd found her footing. "Fine. Yes. Richard, it's been months. I didn't plan it, didn't mean for it to." She stopped, exhaled hard, and the excuse rolled out, rehearsed, flimsy. "You're never here, Daniel." "Not really. Work, your numbers, your quiet little world. I needed something alive, something real." Her voice cracked on real, and it hit me like a shove, the way she spun it, like I'd starved her into his arms. The storm broke then, a rush I couldn't leash, and I slammed my hand on the table. Hard, the photos trembling. "Real? 15 years, Clara. I gave you everything. This house, that car, my trust, and you traded for him." Her face twisted, anger, guilt, defiance all at once. "You gave me things, not you. Richard sees me, knows me. You stopped looking years ago." She flung the words like they'd absolve her, like they'd rewrite the nights I'd waited, the life I'd built for us. I stepped closer, voice dropping, cold now, cutting. "I saw you lie, saw you leave, saw you choose. Don't twist this. I didn't push you to him. You ran." She shook her head, fast, desperate, but her eyes were wet, her hands trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, softer now, cracking. "It just happened." "Happened?" I echoed, the word tasting sour, jagged. I grabbed the photos, thrust them toward her, her car, his door, her life spilling out in pixels. "This doesn't happen, Clara. This is you deciding I wasn't enough." My chest burned, the storm roaring loud, and I wanted to shake her, to make her feel the weight of it, but I didn't. I stood there, breathing hard, watching her crumble just enough to show the truth. She didn't fight back, didn't deny it anymore. She sank onto the couch, hands in her lap, staring at the floor like it held answers I'd never get. "I'm not sorry for him," she said finally, voice small but firm. A dagger slipped through the quiet. "I'm sorry you found out like this." That was it, the last twist, the sharpest one. Not regret for the act, just the mess of it landing on me. I turned away, jaw tight, the room spinning slow around me. The storm didn't fade. It hardened, settled deep, a weight I'd carry into whatever came next. She stayed there, silent, as I walked to the window, staring out at the Mercedes in the dark. Her car. Her choice. My move. The days after that night blurred into a strange calm, not peace, not yet, but a stillness that comes when the storm shifts from chaos to purpose. Clara stayed in the house, moved through it like a ghost, her presence a quiet hum I could ignore if I tried. I didn't speak to her, didn't need to. Words had spilled enough, and what was left was action, mine, deliberate, final. She didn't know I'd already set the wheels spinning, slow and steady, toward a reckoning she'd never see coming. I met with the lawyer again that Wednesday, quiet office, leather chairs, a man who spoke in straight lines. I laid it out, the photos, the tracker logs, the video, the handkerchief still crisp in its plastic sleeve. He nodded, flipped through the stack, his pen tapping the desk in a rhythm that matched my pulse. Adultery's a leverage point, he said, voice dry, factual. State law favors fault. Property split, alimony, she's got less ground to stand on with this. I leaned back, let the words settle. Less ground. Good. I'd given her everything, 15 years, this life, that car, and she'd traded it for Richard Malone. Now I'd take it back, piece by piece, and leave her with nothing to grip. The plan was simple, elegant even. I didn't want her begging, didn't want tears or fights. I wanted her to feel the ground slip away, the way mine had when I smelled his cologne, when I saw her car parked at his door. The Mercedes was the key, her prize, her freedom, the leash she didn't know I held. I let her keep driving it, let her think I'd softened, that the silence between us was surrender. She took it to Richard's again that Friday. I watched the dots settle on the map, same spot, same routine. My lawyer had the paperwork ready by then. Divorce filing, fault-based, citing infidelity. The evidence was ironclad, dates, times, images stacked like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb. Saturday, I played my hand. She was out, gymnastics, she'd said, her voice flat, like the lie didn't even try anymore. I called a tow company, gave them the address from the tracker, Richard's lot. The Mercedes was hers, sure, but registered in my name, my money, my title, my call. They hauled it away, quiet and quick, while she was inside with him. I pictured her stepping out, scarf tied against the wind, seeing the empty space where her silver Escape used to sit. No note, no warning, just gone. My phone buzzed an hour later, her name on the screen. I didn't answer. Let her wonder, let her scramble. The tow guy dropped it at a lot I'd rented, out of sight, out of reach. Step 1. Step 2 was the filing. Monday morning, I had it served, papers delivered to our house while I was at the office, watching numbers blur on my screen. She texted me then, short, sharp. What the Daniel? I didn't reply. The lawyer had coached me, keep it clean, keep it documented, let the courts do the rest. She'd see the evidence listed, cold and clinical, photos, logs, timestamps proving every trip to Richard's door, proving she'd chosen him over me, over us. The house was mine, bought before we married, my name on the deed. The accounts split but tilted my way after years of my income dwarfing hers. The car, already gone. She'd have her clothes, her gymnastics gear, whatever scraps she could claim, and nothing else. Tuesday, she came home late, her face tight, eyes red but dry. No Mercedes, she must have walked or called him for a ride. I was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, when she stormed in, papers clutched in her hand. You can't do this, she said, voice shaking, low. I turned, slow, met her glare. I already did. She threw the stack on the counter, pages fanning out, my proof staring back at her. You think this changes anything? You think taking the car, the money, makes you win? Her words bit, but I didn't flinch. It's not about winning, I said, calm, steady. It's about what's mine. She laughed, harsh, jagged, and shook her head. You're pathetic. That stung more than I'd admit, but I let it slide, let it sink into the storm now coiled tight inside me. Maybe, I said, sipping the coffee, letting the heat ground me. But you're the one who lost. She stood there, breathing hard, then turned and left, door slamming, echoes fading. I didn't follow, didn't need to. The lawyer called later, her signature on the receipt confirmed she'd been served. The process was rolling now, unstoppable. She'd fight, maybe, claw for pieces, but the evidence was a wall she couldn't breach. Richard could have her excuses, her lies, her defiance. I'd keep what mattered. By Thursday, the car was sold, cash deal, quick, to a guy who didn't care about its story. The money went into a new account, mine alone, a buffer for whatever came next. Clara stayed away that night. Richard's place, I figured, the tracker's ghost still whispering her habits in my mind. I sat in the living room, lights off, the house quiet around me. The storm didn't roar anymore. It hummed, low and steady, a current I could live with. She'd driven away in that Mercedes, thinking it was hers. Now it was gone, and so was she, stripped back to nothing but the choice she'd made. My revenge wasn't loud, wasn't messy. It was precise, final, and it felt right. The house felt emptier after that week. Not just her absence, but the way the air settled, like it knew she wasn't coming back. I'd won, in the ways that mattered. The car gone, the papers filed, the life I'd built still mine to hold. But winning didn't feel like I'd thought it would. The storm inside me had raged for weeks, hot and jagged when I found the handkerchief, wild and loud when I faced her. Now it was quieter, not gone, but softer, a tide pulling back to reveal what lay beneath. I walked through those days in a haze. Not lost, not broken, just unmoored. I'd loved her, deeply, in that steady way you don't question until it's gone. I'd seen her laugh over burnt dinners, watched her sleep through thunderstorms, built a world where she fit. And she'd seen me too, once, or so I'd thought. The sadness wasn't just for her betrayal. It was for me, for the man who hadn't noticed her drifting until she was already gone. Friday night, she came back, not to stay. I knew that the second I saw her. The doorbell rang, a sound so rare it startled me, and there she was, scarf loose, no makeup, her eyes tired but clear. She'd called earlier, asked to talk, and I'd said yes, not out of hope, but curiosity, maybe closure. I let her in, watched her step into the living room like a guest who'd forgotten the layout. She didn't sit, just stood by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the driveway. I stayed by the couch, hands in my pockets, waiting. The storm was there, faint now, a hum I could almost ignore. I signed the papers, she said, voice low, steady. It's done. I nodded, knew that already. The lawyer had called, but hearing it from her made it real. She turned then, met my eyes, and there was no fight left in her, no defiance like before. I'm not here to argue, Daniel. I wanted to say it myself. She paused, exhaled, and the words came slow, deliberate. I messed up, not just getting caught, but choosing him, choosing anything over this. I don't expect you to forgive me. Her gaze dropped, then lifted again. But I'm not sorry I'm with Richard. He's better for me. I'm better with him. That hit, harder than I'd braced for. Not regret, not a plea, just truth, raw and unapologetic. The storm flickered, a spark of anger flaring, but it didn't catch. I studied her, her set jaw, her steady hands, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. Better, I said, tasting the word, letting it hang. You think he's better than 15 years? She didn't flinch, just nodded, small, certain. For me, yeah? I stopped feeling alive here. You didn't see it, didn't want to. Richard does. I could have argued, could have thrown her words back, reminded her of the nights I'd stayed, the life I'd given. But it wouldn't change her, wouldn't rewind the months she'd spent driving to him. The sadness swelled then, thick in my throat, not for her leaving, but for the end of something I'd believed in. I looked away, out the window, the dark swallowing the street beyond. Okay, I said finally, simple, flat. If he's better, then go. She shifted, surprised maybe, like she'd expected something. But I was done fighting. For her. For us. The storm had burned out, left me hollow but standing. She lingered a moment, then spoke again, softer. I'll be out by next week. The rest, it's yours. I don't want it. She meant the house, the pieces of our life scattered in these rooms. I nodded, didn't look at her. Good luck, Clara. The words slipped out, reflex maybe, and they sounded empty even to me. She turned, walked to the door, and paused, hand on the knob, back to me. You too, she said, barely audible, then left. The door clicked shut, and the house fell silent again, heavier this time. I stood there, alone, the sadness pooling deep, but beneath it, something stirred. Acceptance, quiet, tentative, like the first breath after a long dive. She was gone, really gone, and I wasn't the man she'd left behind anymore. The next day, I met someone, Lila, a coworker I'd barely noticed before. Dark eyes, warm laugh, a steadiness that didn't demand anything. We talked over coffee, Nothing big, just easy. She didn't know my story, didn't need to. But she stayed, lingered, and for the first time in weeks, the storm didn't hum. It faded, just a little, and I let it. Clara had her better life. I'd find mine. I met a new woman. The way I met Lila wasn't loud or planned. Just a quiet collision on an ordinary day. It was late October, the office thinning out as dusk settled, and I'd stayed behind, wrestling numbers that refused to line up. My head was heavy, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones, and the coffee machine, stubborn as ever, had sputtered its last. I wandered to the break room, half hoping for a fix, and there she was, leaning on the counter, a mug in her hands, steam curling up. She glanced over, dark eyes catching mine, and smirked. "You look like you need this more than me," she said, sliding the mug my way. Her voice was warm, teasing, cutting through the haze. I took it, managed a nod, and she stayed, didn't rush off, just stood there, asking about my day like it mattered. Her name was Lila, she said, and that was it. A spark, small, unassuming, the start of something I didn't chase until it found me. Now she's here, folded into my life like she's always fit. Mornings, I wake to her humming, some tune she won't name, while she pads around the kitchen, her hair loose, her socks never matching. She's messy in the best way, leaving mugs on the counter, her jacket slung over chairs, and I don't mind, don't fix it, just let it be. We cook together most nights, her chopping, me stirring, her elbow nudging mine when I drift off mid-sentence. "Focus, Daniel," she'll say, grinning, and I do, pulled back by her ease, her warmth. She stays over more, her toothbrush by the sink, her breathing soft beside me in the dark, and the house feels fuller, not crowded, just right, like it's breathing with us. Living with her is quiet, steady, a rhythm I'm learning to trust. We sit on the couch some nights, a movie flickering, her legs tucked under, her laugh spilling out at the dumb parts. Other times, it's music, jazz she loves, horns weaving through the room, and she'll lean back, eyes half closed, lost in it while I watch, caught by how she softens, how she's just her. She's patient when I'm quiet, doesn't push when my thoughts wander, but she'll tease me back, light, sharp, her hand brushing mine like a tether. Days off, we walk the river, her pace matching mine, her stories, work, a friend, a stray thought filling the air. It's simple, this life with her, and I sink into it, steady, sure. Through her, I'm changing not fast, not loud, but deep. I used to hold tight plans, control, a life mapped out, and it left me rigid, brittle, ready to crack. She's softened that, loosened the grip I didn't know I had. I smile more now, small, real, the kind that lingers after she's gone to bed. Work's still there, numbers clicking into place, but I don't drown in it. I leave it behind, come home to her, to us. I'm painting the house, grays, blues, colors I choose, and she's there, roller in hand, laughing when I miss a spot. I dig in the garden too, dirt under my nails, and she kneels beside me, her hands steady, her voice soft as we plant. I'm not proving anything anymore, not to her, not to myself. I'm just here, growing, softer but stronger, carved by her presence. With Lila, I'm not the man I was, tense, guarded, chasing structure. She's taught me to breathe, to bend, to let the days unfold without forcing them. I don't plan too far, don't need to. We live now, her warmth beside me, her laugh in the air, and I'm better for it, steadier, lighter, whole in a way I'd forgotten I could be. She's here, I'm here, and that's enough, more than enough, for whatever comes next.